Chapter 3 Rikakar Yukarsodder Svagnome Clash at the Svagov Gate. In the high-density area that sprawled between the fleet and the Svagov Gate, innumerable pricks of shining light were gathered. What's that? Commodore Tlife pointed to the flock of lights on the map of flat space using his command staff. The chances are 0.9997 in 1 that it's an enemy fleet, answered Kilo. Commander Kayur calmly. Thanks, genius, I know that. Tlife barked. But haven't we put on a show of our force of arms for them? Yes, sir, we have. Our march was more than sufficient for that, nodded the chief of staff. Then the enemy must be aware of our military might. They must be. If they didn't get the hint, then we should send them a connecting vessel and tell them. The enemy has no hope of winning. They can't have any. Any commander in their right mind would come to that conclusion, sir. Then why? Rather theatrically, he paused for effect. Why are they loitering over there? At that moment, something else began to give him doubt. He turned to the chief of staff. By the way, you said there was a 0.997 in 1 chance it's the enemy, right? I did, sir. What's the 0.003 in 1 chance? That information is a deception. Or that the sensors all failed at once. Alternatively, that it's an unknown natural phenomenon, or an assembly of heretofore unidentified intelligent life forms. It could also be. Do you honestly think any of those are real possibilities? Said Tlife, taken aback. Each of those possibilities is exceptionally unlikely on their own, but taken together. Okay, fine, I get it. Forget I asked. The commander-in-chief placed his chin on one of his hands and paced the commander's bridge. Lanyu, your honor, I thought you yearned for combat, said Kayur upon seeing Tlife's crabby mood. Oh, I do, Tlife admitted. I just don't enjoy fighting with nagging doubts. What do you think they're doing here, Kayur? I see 3 possible reasons, said Kayur, ready to rattle them off. Possibility 1, the enemy thinks they can, in fact, win. But how? In the face of this overwhelming gap, how could they possibly? To split possibility 1 and 2, first of all, perhaps the capabilities of the enemy's ships far exceed our initial expectations. Are you saying we've failed to fully grasp the hypothetical extent of the enemy's technological know-how? Tlife was less than pleased to learn there was a chance the Empire had been beaten to the technological punch by another interstellar power. What else would you expect from the officers fit solely to feed the cat? Kayur retorted expressionlessly. You're right, said Tlife. The information department are all just a bunch of cat handlers. How daft of me to forget that fact. Communications staff officer Nazo Triua looked resigned and said nothing. But I, personally, appraise the information department slightly higher than that. The chances that that is what happened are almost nil. As such, if in fact the enemy believes they'll win, they may be looking down on the Star Forces. That, or the cause might just lie in their commander's mental state. Battling a madman wouldn't be very elegant, would it? As for possibility 2, Kayur continued, ignoring his commander-in-chief, this could well be a trap. What kind of trap? For example, they might be having a large fleet lying in wait in the normal space by some nearby gate, have their overly small forces engage in combat, hand us a few victories in combat, and pretend to have been driven back into fleeing. Where's the trap there, exactly? Asked Tlife, flabbergasted. The trap being, in our blind zeal chasing down the fleeing ships, they ambush us as soon as we recklessly enter the gate. What did you say? Tlife felt pity. No matter the circumstances, a star pilot so incompetent as to lack due vigilance when entering a gate would never be adorned with a Torah Hadaisam, commander's insignia. Do they think me that senseless? They have no way to know that you, specifically, are this fleet's commander-in-chief, Lanyu. It isn't personal. Rather, it would stem from their general attitude toward the Imperial Star Forces. There's no telling whether or not they believe in our deep-seated reputation. The essence of the Ov is in their overweening pride and recklessness, said Tlife. Those words were famous even among the Ov themselves, so famous, in fact, that one needed only to hear talk of the reputation of the Ov to recall them. We may be a smidgen haughty, I'll give them that, but reckless we are not. Too true, sir. Our war history bears that out. If they've done their homework on our past battles, they'd surely think twice before implementing such an uncertain strategy. If, that is, your hypothetical trap is the one they've laid, said Tlife. The enemy commander should be taken alive. We need to re-educate him about warfare from the ground up. A splendid idea, sir, said Kayur, though as coolly as ever. In any event, seeing as we would never fall for such a crude trap, there's no particular need to come up with counter-strategies. Agreed, said Tlyfe. Possibility 3, the biggest of the 3 is. That's a bad habit of yours, said Tlyfe. He did think highly of Kayur, but he didn't like how pretentious he could be. Why didn't you lead with the biggest possibility? I apologize, sir, said Kayur perfunctorily before continuing. They're the united humankind, or at least, their main force is. And the united humankind's military command is known to often lack a certain flexibility in their orders. Perhaps the enemy commander has been ordered to use what forces they have to defend the Svogov Marquisate to the last. If their commander took such a directive to heart, then gathering their forces in this sector is the most logical course of action. Tlyfe folded his arms. And you're saying that's the highest probability? Yes. As usual, Tlyfe began pacing again. The more he mulled it over, the more convinced he became that there was nothing behind the enemy's actions, that they were merely attempting to resist with what forces they had. Just like Tlyfe himself had been sent with what forces he could muster. Tlyfe had the luxury of retreating if he wanted, but the enemy didn't. That was the sole point of difference between them. The question of why the enemy had sent such a small force to invade Empire territory remained, of course. It was probably a diversion. But that was something for military command headquarters to consider, not him. He was dissatisfied that he wasn't at the main battlefield, but happy that he had a fleet he could command at his discretion. Yes, that's it. Tlyfe raised a fist overhead. I can feel all of my doubts disintegrating into the atmosphere like so much space dust and without a trace left. My heart has vacated the riverbank of uncertainty and finally found its way to the assurance of victory. I know when I need to be grateful, and now is one of those times. Kilo Commander Kayur, I thank you. I am honored, said Kayur, taking the Commander-in-Chief's vote of gratitude exceedingly dispassionately. Then, Tlyfe stopped in his tracks and looked at the map of flat space. I must say, though, I feel sorry for them. This is not the time to spare the enemy your sympathies, sir, said the Chief of Staff. You're right. We warned them. We won't hold back. Tlyfe decreed, gripping his command staff. We'll take them in a pincer attack. I'm against that idea, said Kayur bluntly. Why? It had taken Tlyfe this long to build up that sense of exultation, and now his shoulders drooped. The enemy is too close. They must have caught wind of our movements by now. If we tried a pincer attack in these conditions, not only would it be not as effective, they could very well divide and hit us individually. We probably wouldn't lose outright, but it would result in needless losses. Shreer. Tlyfe wished for the strategy staff officer's opinion. I'm afraid I have to agree with the Chief of Staff, said Creer, to her vexation. I see. Tlyfe felt it a shame, yet he understood that the staff officer's opinions ought to be respected. Even as Commander-in-Chief, Tlyfe worried himself over all the everyday decisions. Not even being on the battlefield would free him from them. The staff officers set various virtual scenarios and conducted battle simulation after battle simulation. As such, if they determined that a certain strategy would merely lead to unnecessary casualties, then he had no reason to doubt it. Crestfallen, Tlyfe's shoulders drooped. There's no getting around it. We may just have to attack them head-on. Indeed. I believe that is the soundest stratagem, sir, said Kayur. Display the battle formation planes. The map of flat space disappeared, replaced by the hypothetical formations. Within the Star Forces, an offensive half-fleet was typically composed of 3 Sabakar, offensive squadrons, 1 Saab Messer, convoy squadron, 1 Saab Botoder, strike squadron, 1 Saab Dikporer, supply squadron, and 3 patrol ships under the direct command of a Raychaesek, commander, plus a few Longyak, communication ships. At present, Tlyfe had 4 offensive half-fleets at hand. Those 4 were lined up on the side, poised to shoot out into the enemy. At the head of each offensive half-fleet was a convoy squadron, shields against enemy mines. After that came the strike squadron. Comprised of battle line warships, each strike squadron was a bow firing mines. The strike half-fleet, Bask Gamlim, was placed so as to cross the 4 offensive half-fleets laterally, thereby bolstering their strike capabilities. Meanwhile, each Sobglar commander squadron had an offensive squadron following on its heels. These were the spears that would skewer the enemy at battle's end. As for the fearsome reconnaissance half-fleet Dun, it would divide its main forces into three and hide between the other groups of ships. The supply squadrons belonging to each of the half-fleets would tail from behind alongside the supply half-fleet Akmatuch. A supremely textbook battle formation, devoid of pretense. "Very well," said Tlyfe. "Arrange them at once." "Yes, sir," Kuyur saluted. From the flagship Kerdia's space-time bubble, several communications vessels emerged, relaying orders to each class of headquarters. At the same time, the enemy's own small-mass space-time bubbles, also likely communications vessels, began to fly into a whirlwind of action. "Enemy space-time bubbles splitting off," shouted the Kaseriak Ragrotter, surveying staff officer, rousing Tlyfe's attention. Countless small space-time bubbles issued from the bubbles lurking at the center area of the high-density sector, rushing toward Tlyfe's fleet. "There is a 0.99996 in one," Kuyur began. "Enough probabilities," Tlyfe cried. "They're enemy mines, sir," he said calmly, as though he hadn't noticed he'd been shouted down. "I know that," he snapped, but his expression immediately changed to a smile. "So, it's begun." Indeed. So the curtain rose on the first full-blown battle in this great war, the clash at the Svogov Gate. "Commence the Hoxashik's Meskater, defensive mine battle," ordered Tlyfe. A volley of mines fired from the patrol ship Kerdai, which was the cue for the battle line ships under its command to commence the mine battle. There was a large gap between the range of mines fired from the high-density sector and those fired at that sector. The enemy mines fired from the sector would reach the Bayraktar Tlyfe fleet, but they couldn't shoot the enemy from their current position. As such, this attack was aimed at the enemy mines themselves. Both groups of mines drew nearer and nearer at dizzying speeds. Contact made with space-time bubbles. Azimuth of 305. Distance, 65. Area of contact expanding, reported the surveying staff officers. The red blips that represented enemy mines and the blue blips that represented allied mines mingled in an interweaving maelstrom. Following the order's input into the computing crystals, their mines attempted to fuse with the space-time of their enemy counterparts, while the enemy mines attempted to flee their embrace. For the enemy, there was no point if their mines crashed against mines that would perish before reaching their fleets anyway. And yet, the enemy mines, chased off and intercepted, were cornered into reluctant space-time fusion. When the space-time bubbles fused, they annihilated, venting large quantities of space-time particles in the process. Localized high-density sectors were born and subsequently faded away. Flat space undulated and space-time particles diffused in surging ripples, which often shook other space-time bubbles. The unscathed mines that barreled through that barrage hurtled ever close to Tlyfe's fleet. Naturally, they had been broadly reduced in number, but there were still enough not to be taken lightly. It was the LATEC escort ship unit's job to meet the mines at the pass. Escort ships were equipped with numerous mobile small-caliber cannons. One sim core of 6 ships formed a single space-time bubble, and each of those bubbles stood against the wave of mines. The escort corps' space-time bubbles advanced, striving to fuse with the mines. Now those mines refrained from skirting away, themselves aiming to fuse. The purpose of the initial volley was in fact to destroy the escort vessel unit. The instant the mines fused with their space-time, they were greeted by innumerable lasers and streams of antiprotons. Some mines managed to take escort vessels down with them, but most merely ended up pointlessly increasing the mass of the escort corps' space-time bubbles. Within the seething expanse of flat space, the distance between foes steadily closed. Distance from enemy, 142. "Enemy vanguard now within our range of fire," said the surveying officer. "Copy. Change the mines target to the enemy vanguard," Tlyfe commanded. The new volley of mines didn't spare their enemy counterparts a single glance, instead thrusting toward the enemy fleet at all speed. Their obstacles removed, the group of enemy mines flocked around the escort vessel unit in great herds. Ultimately, reports of vanquished escort ships turned incessant, and the mines began approaching the battle line warships. Distance from enemy, 100. "The time has come," said Tlyfe, eyes on Kuyur. "Sick the Ftun on them." The reconnaissance half-fleet Ftunes commander was a Roifrodek, associate commodore, by the name of Spor Aronsekpot Nim Latepan Penez, Great Duchess of Latepan. The House of Spor was a large family that boasted a level of social prestige next to the imperial family of Avriels in rank, containing over 500 individuals of noble rank. The Nimiek Latepan, Great Duchess's estate of Latepan, was almost synonymous with the noble Spor family, held aloft by its succession of heirs. But that wasn't all. The Nimhin Latepan, or Great Duchy of Latepan, included 3 inhabited planets and was therefore recognized far and wide as the territory nation with the greatest wealth in the empire. In other words, she was the head of the most affluent, most storied house among all nobles, which caused the Ftunes Almkasariak, senior staff officer, Hectocommander Kvatis, to always wonder why she didn't just retire from the Star Forces and enjoy the high life. That she'd join the Star Forces to begin with, that was a given as the duty of a noble. The officer just couldn't understand why she stuck around after fulfilling said duty. He tried thinking of it as her responsibility or her mission in life, but observing her behavior, the words her hobby always sprang unbidden as a wrench in the works of his rationalization. The reason Kvatis had transferred over to the Ftunes headquarters was because his predecessor had to take impromptu Kagsamhoth, maternity leave, due to a sudden case of falling in love. In addition, nobody on the inside was deemed sufficiently qualified for promotion. Less than a month had passed since then, yet Kvatis still wasn't used to the atmosphere in this headquarters. And the reason for that is her, thought Kvatis, gazing at the Rechaesabak, commander's seat. It sported a lavish, elaborately embroidered baldachin, which was supported by 4 pillars of marble white, each with exquisite and minutely detailed engravings. As hard as it was to believe, according to rumor, the embroidery was done by hand. This decoration alone would be tough to acquire through 3 whole years of an associate commodore's salary. Of course, star pilots with star fiefs went without pay. Kvatis shifted his gaze to the space behind the commander's seat. The imperial coat of arms, the 8-headed dragon known as the Gofnosh, the Glak-Ayad Birer, half-fleet banner, and the symbol of the House of Spor, the Gathersek, golden crow, were arranged in a triangle shape on the wall. The golden crow was at the bottom of the triangle, but it was a size bigger than the other banners, as though to underscore that it was the most important. Once again, Kvatis's eyes came to the commander's seat. How hopelessly out of place, he thought with intensity. The twin-wing circlet of the imperially certified star pilot ill-suited the assiduously braided, scarlet-blue hair more fit for a palace banquet. Unbecoming, too, was a military uniform on her while she was so lazily reclining. In that pose, she could very well have been lying sprawled on some luxurious chaise. It was certainly true that star pilots of imperial appointment enjoyed various privileges. Decorating one's commander's seat using personal funds was one of them. But decorating it to this extent could only be called self-indulgent. Soon after taking the post, he admonished her to act a little more like a proper commander, please. It will boost morale, only to be shot down with a no thanks. I'll just count my blessings that there isn't some handsome boy servant offering her some chilled apple cider on a silver platter. Kvatis shuddered at the thought. No. Don't tell me she expects that role of me. Hectocommander Kvatis Uspersesper, a Klapame, staff officer insignia, decorated Sizek, knight 2nd class. Kvatis banished the absurd notion from his mind. Yet in the end, he simply couldn't come to grips with his commander. Lanyu, he said. Might as well break the ice. He had nothing better to do at the moment anyway. What is it? Her red pupils flitted inside their almond-shaped slits. The Spor family feature, the Siloampiana Spor, crimson eyes of Spor. Her eyes were the deep red of a giant star in its final stages. Are you acquainted with Lanilober Svagnum, the honored Marquis of Svagov? Sure. Symph, noble society, is a small world. What are they like? He's a louse, she said, summing him up in so many words. I can't bear the thought of letting my ships get hurt to save somebody like him. Huh. Kvatis was so dumbfounded he forgot to chide her. But don't worry. I won't be mixing business with private affairs. Kvatis stared at the baldachin and gave careful consideration to the mentality that led to the words, my ships. No mixing business with private affairs? Really? His misgivings filled him right to the eyeballs, where they shined. That look is insubordination against a superior officer, she said, responding irritably to his deprecatory mien. Please accept my apologies, he said, though he remained unconvinced. At that moment, their orders came. An interbubble communication from headquarters. The communications staff officer turned around from the console. Read it aloud, said Spore. Yes, ma'am. Overrun them. End of communication. My. This is my first time working with Commodore Tlife. I commend him for his fine, concise orders. Now, Noctam Bada, complete mobile state, for space-time bubbles 1 through 6. Assemble a single column for each squadron and move to the front of the fleet. The Ftun was made up of the commander's squadron, in addition to 6 Sobusamer, reconnaissance squadrons, and 1 supply squadron. A squadron's name contained a number given it by the Star Forces. As such, its official name contained a long number like 607. That was less than convenient, so headquarters allotted reconnaissance squadrons the numbers 1 through 6, with the supply squadron as number 7. Even the OV placed importance on functionality from time to time. The space-time bubbles that had been formed 3 ships to a bubble, with those ships in turn keyed to a battle line warship, split off into individual units. In doing so, their speed was multiplied by roughly 1.73, and so the lines of space-time bubbles overtook the battle line warship, followed soon by the escort vessel unit. Commander's Squadron, stationary state. Transmit AGAC Asperhot, signal of assembly. Assume massed battle formation 3. If the prospect of bearing the full brunt of the enemy's onslaught had her perturbed, she certainly didn't show it. Her commands came with aplomb. The 3 patrol ships of the headquarters squadron had formed a triangle, and needless to say, at its head sailed the flagship Hairbirch. Behind that triangle, 5 lines were forming. Number 4 is being slow, Kvatis pointed out. Even though the other squadrons were beginning to move laterally in front of the escort vessel unit, Squadron 4 was still puttering near a battle line warship. I've never liked a laggard, Spore Tetutade. But it's fine. They'll follow us eventually. Let's strike using the other 5 squadrons. But Kvatis had been about to scold her when he thought better of it. It was, after all, a not illogical conclusion. Fussing too much over concentrating troops and waiting for number 4 would be handing the enemy time. Moreover, with the lack of defense for the escort vessel unit, it would expose it to enemy fire. It was true that at the moment, they ought to value speed over other factors. That being said, Kvatis couldn't be sure his commander hadn't made that call based solely on simple sentiment. The 5 squadrons have formed ranks, without number 4, Kvatis reported. Tell the captains the following, complete mobile state. Course, 310. Continuously transmit the AGAC, signal, follow me. Yes. Kvatis relayed her orders to the communications staff officer. With that, the reconnaissance half-fleet Ftun was on the move again. In that direction lay the enemy's vanguard, stretching wide on both sides. The enemy began focusing its mine fire on Ftun. Kvatis switched his circlet to external input mode and attuned to the Hairbirch S detectors. Immediately, he frowned.